I got to go on an interesting fossil hunt here recently on another one of our great bodies of water. For those of us who grew up around the Mississippi River, we still have the grave warnings from our parents in our memories telling us not to go near it. That river will kill you, they said. So by and large, we didn't go out on the river all that much. Mississippi's way more a commercial waterway than a recreational river anyway. I don't ever recall anyone water skiing on the river. I'm sure they may have, but for every one you might have out here, you'll have 1,000 on Lake Ferguson at Greenville, or Lake Washington, or Lake Chico in Arkansas, and on, up and down the river. Fishermen still go out on the river, of course, and hunters. Howard Brent of Greenville spent most of his life on the river. River water runs in his veins.
Oh, man, I mean, it's been my life, and it's the change in it. You know, you go up the river one time, and then the water comes up and it changes, but everything is beautiful. I mean, I saw a cougar, well, they call him a panther here, chasing 4 deer across the sandbar, and I could see the long tail on him. You know, that was up there close to Big Island, right across from Rosedale.
Puddin' Moore of Greenville has been scouring the river for years, not the water, but the banks, looking for whatever he could find, and mostly what he's found are fossils. Most are late Ice Age mammals. That puts him at about 10,000 to maybe 100,000 years old. He's pretty much recognized as the go-to man if you find a bone around Greenville and want it identified.
We find mastodon, woolly mammoth, ground sloth, North American camel, prehistoric horses, tapir.
Gus Johnson, proprietor of Jim's Cafe in downtown Greenville, says he was the person who introduced Puddin' to fossil hunting. Fossil hunting's like anything you do that you have any luck with early on. It becomes a habit.
Oh yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I haven't done as much as I'd like to. I've been very busy, so I hadn't had a chance to go this year. This was the year to go because everything was down.
Everything was down in the summer of 2012. And was it ever, especially compared to the spring of 2011 when the Mississippi River set, or nearly set, new record high water levels everywhere along the western border of our state and elsewhere. But by the summer of 2012, the river had fallen over 50 feet from last year's highs. The Mississippi River's never fallen that much in a year in modern history. But when the river is low like this, that means the bottom, usually under feet of water, is exposed. A mile of river bottom that is usually underwater bakes in the summer sun this year, and that exposed river bottom is ripe for fossil harvesting. I tagged along with George Phillips, the paleontology curator with the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science, and James Starnes with the DEQ, and Peter Kucherka, who spent his career in the nuclear industry and as a retiree enjoys volunteering and lending his abilities as a technician with the Natural Science Museum, and the mayor of Rosedale, Carrie Estes. All of us went out on a huge sand and gravel bar near Rosedale, and our quest was to find fossils. And this was the year to go.
This historic water level low on the Mississippi River has revealed portions of the river, gravel bars and sandbars, that are, in some cases, rich in fossil bones.
People find fossils in the Mississippi all the time. There's just more places to look in 2012 because of the low water. But George's office is full of finds from the past as well as this year.
This year, the most exciting fossil from the river is probably the carnivore fossils. Carnivore fossils are rather rare. In a natural setting, you may only see one predator per 100 and 150 prey species or prey animals. So we've got 3 different carnivore fossil reports this year, and one of them is a jaguar jawbone, the others is spectacle bear, and we also have part of the jaw of an American lion. In fact, the very first American lion fossil was found in Mississippi in the 1830s, found near Natchez, Mississippi.
This is how low the water is. That little white dot out there in the background is a towboat out on what's left of the river. All of the gravel and sand between us and it was under dozens of feet of water last year. So before the winter rains fill the river up again, our troop of bone sleuths are taking advantage of the drought. Knowing what to look for helps. Fossils are rocks too, so finding a particular rock in a pile of rocks is like looking for a particular needle in a haystack-sized stack of needles. But George spots something pretty quickly.
This bone is very light, so the light weight relative to size and the brown color and the pattern, spongy on one side and smooth on the other, is very characteristic of bone, fragments of bone.
Quickly, the search widens from only fossils to other interesting rocks. James Starnes, a geologist with the State Department of Environmental Quality, looks at the rocks and reads the story of the history of the river in them like you and I would read a book.
This is suit quartzite, and this stuff came down from the ancestral Missouri River when glaciers rerouted the Missouri River, which used to flow north down into the Mississippi Basin. And like I said, this stuff is a little over 1 billion years old. It's probably one of the oldest rocks you'll be able to find out here.
Our big find of the day was uncovered by George. This is a bone that connects the head to the neck of an extinct giant ground sloth. The museum has a replica of a complete skeleton on display back in Jackson. Now this, where I'm pointing on the replica, is where the bone that came out of the river sands near Rosedale is, in context with the rest of the skeleton. James was content with volcanic rock that wound its way here from way out west, and rocks with mineral content that told where they originated and at about what era in geologic time. I enjoyed discussing everything from the price of gasoline to global warming with Peter. And as awe-inspiring as the rocks and fossils we found was being out on this sand and gravel bar where last year 30 or 40 feet of water would have been above our heads at this exact spot, with a mile of bar to hike back across between us and the car. Wondering when anyone would ever see the Mississippi River this low again. The Mississippi Museum of Natural Science acts as both a center for education and research, housing vast biological collections containing over 1 million specimens of animals, plants, and fossils. Paleontology curator George Phillips shared with us some of the museum's amazing array of ancient artifacts.
But this bone right here was the bone we found that day. Do you recall it?
I do. What will you do with this bone?
Well, this bone will go into the Museum of Natural Science collection, and if we get enough bones one day, we will build our own reproduction using Mississippi bones. The reproduction that stands in the display at the Museum of Natural Science is made of casts, and it's a composite skeleton. But we've probably got about 35% of an actual Mississippi skeleton that we've been working on for several years now.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. But see, now to me that would sound like it's impossible, and I guess it really is just sort of hit and miss, but are you really have any high hopes of getting this whole skeleton someday?
Oh yeah, you know, it's a gradual process, and it takes a village in the sense that a lot of our material is donated by private individuals. We get phone calls and emails and walk-ins from all over Mississippi. People are finding things in Mississippi, rural Mississippi, in metropolitan areas, and they're bringing them to the museum to have them identified. You wouldn't believe what people bring into our Fossil Roadshow every year, and actually throughout the year.
Did you try to value these fossils, or do you just tell people what they have?
In a sense, although it's not a financial appraisal, we appraise their scientific value or their scientific importance. And sometimes they're important enough and worthy of a donation to the museum, particularly if they represent a specimen of an extinct species that we've not yet documented in Mississippi. We're gradually documenting year after year through our own efforts and through donations what Mississippi looked like in the prehistoric world.